Namaste, hello there, a big hello to everybody, and welcome to this session on managing virtual teams as a part of the Inspire for Impact series from Dimension 3. You are on mute, but in case you realize you are unmuted, please kindly mute yourself so that there's least distraction, and we will call you as and when required to contribute by opening your lines, audio lines. My name is Shri Vallabh, and I'm the founder of Dimension 3 Global Solutions. And along with me, I have Hema. Hema is also the founder of Dimension 3 Global Solutions. And we are excited to have you this afternoon. For those who are in India, and if you are joining from other time zones, good evening and good afternoon, good morning, everybody else. Uh, the Inspire for Impact series is a series of panel discussions we have been hosting for the past few weeks, primarily on inclusion and diversity based topics, but then inclusion and diversity as well as sales effectiveness as a couple of topics that we try to address in these webinars, in these online panel discussions. And we get experts from various industries, various backgrounds to contribute in these discussions. So today we're talking about virtual teams. Now, ever since the COVID-19, yes, we are not going to talk about COVID-19. We are not going to talk about coronavirus, but then the entire virtual teams working virtually is a hot topic ever since the situation has started. And working virtually does come with its own challenges and benefits and opportunities. And today, broadly, the discussion is based on that. I would like to take 2 minutes to introduce and to let you know what we do at Dimension 3. Hema and I lead this team, and we are in existence since 2000, in a second, in 2012. And primarily, we work on three areas, that is inclusion and diversity solutions, and sales effectiveness and customer experience, and leadership capability development. These are the three areas that we broadly work on. And in inclusion and diversity, we work on helping organizations build a more equitable, more a fairer workplace. We work around gender, people with disabilities, intercultural competency, generations, and LGBT, etc. And in sales, we work on designing sales processes and on training people on effectiveness in the sales process, and also helping sales personnel provide optimum and the best customer experience. And in leadership capability development, we work on emotional intelligence, leadership skills, coaching feedback, and a number of other areas. Broadly, these are the three areas that we work on in the organization and provide uh, top class solutions in this area. So I don't want to go beyond that. Today on the panel, we have a very knowledgeable and an expert panel with us. And I'll just give you a second. I want to check whether the recording is on. Yes, we are on. So we have a panel of very popular, well-known, but most importantly, knowledgeable subject matter experts in their respective areas. I'd first like to introduce Harjeet. Harjeet Khanduja is a well-known personality. Anybody who is in LinkedIn probably knows who Harjeet Khanduja is. Harjeet Khanduja works as the Vice President Human Resources for Reliance Jio. He is a LinkedIn influencer, TEDx speaker, and I have personally interacted, met Harjeet. I have had opportunities to listen to him speak on stage, and I must say that he's a very witty storyteller, a wonderful humor speaker. He's a poet, and he comes with a lot of breadth of experience working in different industries, be it automotive, manufacturing, IT, ITES, and the like. And he's also won multiple awards. Some I'm just going to share some of those that he has won. One is the HR Leadership Award, the Pride of the Nation Award, a Top 100 HR Minds, and Top 50 HR Tech Leaders, and many more. He is an international Hindi poet, and I have had the opportunity to listen to him in one of the TEDx events too. So, Harjeet, thank you so much, and it's such an honor to have you on the panel. Welcome to the discussion, Harjeet.
Thank you, Shri.
Brilliant. Thanks, Harjeet. And next we have Susan, and Susan joins in today's discussion from Chicago, and it's roughly 5:30 in the morning from where Susan is joining. Susan, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us. I know you had a very eventful yesterday evening, and with so much less to sleep, I really appreciate the fact that you made it to this call despite technological challenges. Now, Susan is a creator of compassionate diversity. Compassionate diversity is an innovative method of or method or an approach to inclusive leadership. She is the trademark owner for compassionate diversity. She practices out of Milwaukee in Greater Chicago area. She's the president of DaiOne LLC, which uh, uh, deals with helping organizations just like Dimension Free help them with their inclusion and diversity goals. And Susan is also the founder of New Diversity Summit. Now, the New Diversity Summit is an online summit which uh, which works on inclusion and diversity. Every year, this summit happens in the month of April. We just concluded in New Diversity Summit 2020, and we had speakers from all over. So Susan was able to gather speakers from all around the world, from across different continents, from all continents except Antarctica. So, Susan, such a pleasure to have you, and welcome to the discussion. And next we have with us, and Susan, can you just check if you're able to unmute yourself? Oh yeah,
Hey, it
great.
worked that time. Thank you. Thanks,
No problem.
Paula.
Thank you so much. And then we have Natasha Madan Kher. Natasha is with Cognizant India as the program lead for diversity and inclusion, and she's a certified diversity professional, CDP, and she has almost 2 decades of work experience working across organizations, working across multiple international brands, and she's also certified design thinker and design thinking expert, not design thinker, design thinking expert, and a practitioner in the areas of MBTI and NLP. She she holds great interest and passion in the area of inclusion and diversity, and I'm a passionate follower of her blogs, her articles, and some things that she does in this area. So thank you so much for joining us, Natasha. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Vallabh. It's great to be here as well.
Great, brilliant. So with that, I will stop sharing the screen for a minute so that we are able to see each other better way. All right. Okay, and also from our side, we also have Hema. Hema is again comes with almost 23 years of work experience in the HR field. She's she has worked with multiple companies, both small and big, in and set up processes. Has worked in talent acquisition and HR generalist roles, and has also helped a lot of startups set up their HR shop. So good to have you, Hema. Okay, so okay.
Thank you, Sri Vallabh. Thanks for the introduction.
Great. So let's begin the discussion. We will roughly take about 90 minutes is the overall duration for this panel discussion. We will close by 5:30 p.m. India time, and at the end of the session, we will also have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, etc., what you could do is you could either wait for the question answer section in the end and ask your questions. Option two is you can also type in your questions as we progress through the discussion. If you have questions, you can type the questions in the chat window to everybody or to Hema in private, and she will take up those questions, and we will have the panel members respond. And for those who are new to Zoom as an application, we have a few features in Zoom. What I suggest is please do keep your videos off so that you can save on bandwidth. Right now, we'll have only the panel members' videos on, and then um, there is a chat feature. So if you're able to go to the chat feature, you will be able to type in your message there. So I would request everyone to send a hi on chat. Address it to everyone, not privately, just to ensure that I know you're able to use the chat feature. Just type in a hi so that I know that you're able to use the chat feature. Great, fantastic. Okay. And then at the bottom of the screen, you also have this reactions emoticon. So if you would, if there is any point somebody is making, any panel members and any speakers or any participants are making a point, you can use the reactions column for applause or for thumbs up. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll start. I'll start with the first question itself to Harjeet, and through the session there will be also a couple of polls I'll open up, and please do participate in those polls. So Harjeet, the first question I'm going to open up a poll in some time, Harjeet, but before that, as a precursor, I would like to have your perspective on what works and what does not for managers and team members in a virtual work arrangement. Now, before you respond, I would also like to set context for all the listeners, for all those who have joined, in terms of the definition of virtual working. What exactly is virtual working? So that we are aware of the scope of the discussion we are having right now. Virtual arrangement or working virtually in today's context means virtual teams are those who work from different geographical locations. Those people who are a part of a team but who are not in the same geographical location, but they work from different geographical locations. So it's not just work from home, but there could be people working from different offices of the same organizations as a part of the team, or people could be working from home. Also, that also is included as a part of a virtual team. So over to you, Harjeet. What works and what does not, according to you, or based on your experience for managers and team members when it comes to virtual teams?
Shri, I have experienced this virtual team environment very recently after this lockdown. And I can tell you, you would have seen that movie. Look, I use a lot of movie references, so excuse me for that. You have heard about Thor. You would have seen him, that this guy is fit and fine, and then suddenly Thanos comes and destroys the whole world.
Right.
After that, what is he doing? He is working from home. And the first complication you see with that person is fitness. He has grown a big belly and he is sitting bare chested, enjoying beer. So most of the times when we talk about virtual teams, that is what comes to our mind, that this is how virtual teams work. And the problem with this is that you actually hurt yourself because you are hurting your body, especially in this time when you are working from, say, from a lockdown environment. It is very important to walk or do some kind of exercise. If you miss on that, that becomes the biggest problem. And not only the physical fitness, there is something called mental fitness. Now, how does mental fitness comes into picture is, generally if you have to go to office, what do? You wake up, take a shower, and then wear clothes and then go to office. Here, you get out of the bed and sit on the chair and say, I am in office. Most of the people wear whatever is seen in the camera, and now shorts have become really popular. Now, when shorts become popular, you actually move from an formal mode to informal mode, and that starts affecting your mindset. And then you get that, okay, let me do some personal work also, some personal agenda also. I also fell into trap, like when I tried doing this for the first time. I also fell into this trap of doing something along with what I am doing for my organization. And then my wife had to coach me. So you need a coach who can actually guide you through these kind of problems. I was under a lot of stress. She told me, you are not on vacation. When you are working virtually, you are actually on work, and you have to behave in that manner that this is your personal time and this is your official time. And when you say dress informally and behave casually, what impression it gives at home. So when I started working remotely from my home, my wife saw me. And within 2 days, she realized that what she thought I am doing at office, I do very little of that. Her impression was that as if I go to office and I break stones. So she allocated some house duties also to me, that now you have to wash dishes. Now, this is something which I brought upon myself by becoming casual. And second is, especially if you're working virtually and especially from home, then home figures also try to utilize you for homework. And this homework at times is very difficult. Look, when you're working virtually, you're in an office, everyone takes care of your ergonomics, what kind of seat you're sitting in. And we see all those school offices where you are sitting on a bean bag. And suddenly you realize when you start working from, say, home in these kind of environments, you get to know of ergonomics when it starts hurting your back. Then you come to chairs, then you start sitting on, then you start appreciating what is ergonomics and what my organization was trying to do for me. Another important piece is from organization side. When organization managers look at you and you are working virtually, the first question which comes to their mind is whether this guy is actually working or not. And when you are working virtually, it becomes very, very important to be formal in giving your daily status reports, making sure that how the work is happening, and you should have, especially if you're a manager, you should know that what is getting done, what is not getting done, and how I am going to take care of it. Like when you're in office, you send a report, you can talk about that report. But when you're working virtually, then your report should be so elaborate that the person who is looking at your report should be able to figure out this is what you want to say, because you are not there to explain. In offices, in physical environment, a lot of these things happen, say, in an informal manner. Another important piece is earlier when I used to go to office, a physical office, at the end of the day, whatever the time it is ending, I used to close my laptop. And if after that my boss is calling and my boss tells me, hey Harjeet, there is an important work. And I used to say, I have left for home. He used to say, okay, we will do it tomorrow. Now the problem is, boss can call anytime. And I can't say that I have left for home because I never leave office. And most of us find it difficult that when to start and when to stop. I have seen people who call you at 6 o'clock, like we have called Susan at 6 o'clock in the morning. And like somebody called me and said, I heard that this lockdown is going to be extended. I said, okay, so what? I think we should extend it for 6 more weeks. I said, that is not up to me. That is for the Prime Minister to decide whether he wants to extend. But he wanted to discuss that at 6 o'clock in the morning. I said, why don't you talk to my boss? Then he said, he only gave me your number. Then I realized my boss is more smarter than me. So these are kind of the things which we should take care of, and what actually has started working better, or what actually works better in this kind of environment. I have been in a company before my current assignment where I was working with a US healthcare IT giant. So I've been into this environment. I have seen that cadence is better when you are in virtual teams. Your availability is better from business perspective. Project management is much, much better because everything is written down and everything is pointed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your reviews are better, they are pointed, there are lesser personal elements in reviews. And your connection with the colleagues is better. Look, when you work physically, there is a warmth. And once you are used to that warmth, that psychological concept that you are habituated to that warmth, then you stop speaking to each other. Now, when you are away, then those connections, that frequency increases and that helps. So I believe, to my mind, this is what works and what doesn't work when you're in a virtual environment.
Super. Thank you so much, Harjeet. That was really what I would say, a very witty and humorous take to the present situation and working virtually. Now, I'm going to open up a poll for the participants before I move ahead to Susan and Natasha. You will see two questions coming up on your screen, and I think you'll have a few seconds, 30 seconds to 1 minute to respond to those questions. So I'll open the first poll. This is about your experience as a virtual team member. This basically gathers insights around those. So there are two questions you would need to respond. And yeah, Vikram, you have a hand raised. Yes, Vikram, you have a question. I've unmuted you. Vikram Singh? Okay, so maybe that went by mistake. Okay.
That's
Okay, sure. So I'll open up this poll and please respond to that. You've got about, yeah, you got 30 seconds to respond to this question, two questions. Okay, I'm going to extend it for 10 seconds more so that everybody has an opportunity to respond to the poll. Okay. So I'm going to share these results with you for everybody. Here we go. I think you can see on the screen. 60% of the people polled have said that they have worked in a virtual environment, and 70% of those of the people who have responded feel that working virtually is moderately effective. 10% people feel that it's not at all effective, and about 20% people feel it's very effective. So I would like to piggyback on this particular insights and move on to Susan and get her talking about what's her experience. I know for sure that Susan has worked virtually for many years, because I know Susan for almost now, I think 16 years, and I know that she has worked virtually. So looking at these poll results, Susan, and aligning with your experience around the world, how do you think virtual working arrangements are leveraged worldwide, and how effective are they? And could you provide some specific examples around areas that you have worked with in North America, Europe, etc.? Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shivalab. You're right. Like I'd like to say now I've been doing virtual work since before virtual work was cool, right? I asked, years ago when I was in a big consulting company, I asked for a modified work schedule, and then ultimately was working all the time from home. And then since then, Shivalab and I have moved out of that big company. That's how we met, and both have our own own organizations and work together from time to time on projects as well. So I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I would love to ask the 10% who don't think working from home or virtual work is effective to see what they think is wrong, because I think it's in how we get it set up, and a couple other points I want to make sure that I hit today as well, around communication. I think Harjeet hit some of that as well. I think right now, especially now, I recognize your definition, Vallabh, was bigger than just working at home, but I think we're here now because of what's going on with this global crisis, and more people than ever are being forced to work at home. And I like to say work at home versus work from home, because these are not largely formal arrangements that are set up as a permanent way for people to continue working once this crisis ends. It's an emergency situation, right? And so I think in the long term, it is going to lead to more thinking, and it's going to give us more changes long term in the way that we work. But actually, for right now, this is just really a crisis situation that we're going through. Another point is, I think it's important to remember that not everybody can work from home. And so companies do need to practice discernment in thinking about this. And it's going to require a lot of flexibility and openness. That's always been the case. But again, now we're being forced to think about it. Often companies didn't want to think about these remote work arrangements because they equated being fair with treating everybody the same, and that's just not the case. And so now they're going to have to use some discernment to think about that. So one of the things that we know is happening, especially right now, is I saw a number yesterday, and I had to read it 3 times to make sure it was right. Company's done some research here in the States and said that some of these work from home initiatives, because of this COVID-19, is saving US employers 30 billion, that's with a B, US dollars every day. So that's about 2.3 trillion rupees, okay, a day. So companies are going to start to recognize this does save money. This does create more engaged employees. And the thing is, companies are still hiring during this time as well. So we've got healthcare companies looking for social workers, registered nurses, case managers here in the States. Cybersecurity is obviously a big thing now. So there's cybersecurity jobs that are opening up, and then a whole array, customer service, human resources, those types of jobs that we can typically do from behind a desk or with a computer. And so those are still in demand. The other thing is that companies are getting really creative now with some of the benefits that they are offering employees, and things like home office budgets, entertainment packages for children. We're all stuck inside, and those of you who are parents, you're not only working, you probably have a partner, spouse who's working from home as well. You've got kids that now you're responsible for their education. So companies are offering some of these entertainment packages or education packages for their kids as well. And I even found one organization in one of our states here that is shipping their employees wine, and they're having virtual tasting sessions over Zoom, right? So that's their bonding. We have to find new ways to bond as we're going through this. To Harjeet's point, you're not seeing everybody every day, so you've got to find new ways to bond and connect. There's also an ad agency in London. They do they bring in people from around the world 3 times a year to do just a bonding comedy night. And they've switched that, obviously, to do virtual. There's as I mentioned, cybersecurity company here in the States that has set up math and science and e-learning courses to help parents educate their children. And then probably many of you have heard of Citrix, a software company. They have arranged for the employees to do online volunteer work for the Smithsonian Institute here in the States. And so they're helping to actually transcribe historical documents. And so there's a lot of creativity that's going on right now to keep folks engaged. And really the possibilities are endless, but what it does call for is for you to understand your employees. It gives you a better opportunity to understand your employees better and what's really important for them.
All right. I think those are great insights, Susan. And on your based on your experience, on the flip side, what doesn't work? What are some pitfalls of setting set up like that?
What doesn't work? Well, gosh, disengaged employees, right? I think there's a lot in this that is about trust. I think many of the questions that supervisors have around this are typically related to trust and control. And now that we don't see each other all the time, it's like one of our senses has been removed, right? And so we really need to learn, get our mindset around not necessarily where things get done or how they get done, but what gets done. And so when we obsess about what doesn't work, right, or how people are doing, or what they're doing, obsess over where they're doing it rather than what's getting done, that certainly doesn't work. Building trust requires releasing control, and so this is forcing us to release control. And I just think what doesn't work is obsessing over things. However, to Harjeet's point, making sure you're keeping connected. You are going to have to probably manage a little bit more. Lots of times supervisors are made supervisors because they're technical experts, not because they are good at managing people. And so focusing on shifting that focus, if we're not building those personal skills, that's going to be problematic right now. Right? We've got to know how to build trust. You have to trust your employees to get their work done, and they need to trust you to support them. And if we're not doing that, it's not going to work.
Sure, thanks. And yes, there are both sides. And you also mentioned research, and you're also saying you would like to talk to those people who found it not effective. And there are various bodies of research. I was doing some reading myself, and Harvard points to a research done by a company, I think called as Point Consulting or something, where they found that teams which are of the size of 10 or more people are not as effective as they should be. And this particular company found that the worst performing teams were those who had 13 or more team members within them. Now, every research will point to different statistics, but then speaking about wine, Susan, I think wine tasting, etc. I think anybody on this call, all of us would love to take up such jobs or such opportunities where we get to do wine tasting. And in case you do not know, I'm also part of a group where we host. Ever since this COVID-19 thing has happened, we get together for musical get-together gatherings, etc. Every week, every Saturday. So yeah, there are ways to leverage this. Going over to Natasha. Natasha, coming from a global to a local perspective, in a country like India, what are some of the challenges or pitfalls related to working virtually? One part of the question. And the other part of the question is, does culture play a role in how successful virtual teams are? And the second part of this question, I would want Natasha and Susan to share the response for the question. So once Natasha is done, I'll go back to Susan to talk about your perspective on the cultural aspect of it. So Natasha, over to you. From a country like India, what would be challenges or pitfalls?
Sure, thank you. Well, when I thought of this question, Shri, there's so many obvious things that come to my mind, and I think primarily something that I also pick up from what Susan mentioned a while ago. A lot of leaders in India, with all due respect, become leaders because they're fantastic at what they do. Right? How many times have we really figured out and analyzed, is this individual a great people leader or not? They may be great performers themselves, and no doubt, but are they great people leaders? Because at this point in time, when we're talking about a virtual environment, whether it is in a situation of a lockdown or it's in a situation where you have a regular atmosphere and still you have people working from across various locations, various geographies, how many of us are able to build that instant credibility for ourselves, not just because of the appraisal ratings and because of the technical expertise, but also because of the fact that, hey, I am talking to a human who understands me, and I'm talking to somebody who has empathy, and of course somebody who's serious about the work I'm delivering, definitely, because that's why I get paid. But at the same time, I'm treated like a human and not a report number. Right. So I think one of our challenges that, and I'm going to pure play say this is my experience of what I've noticed with teams. I've been a people leader myself. I've been an individual contributor, and like Susan said, when working from home wasn't cool. So I've been working from home for about 9 years now. And 9 years ago in India, working from home was considered as, oh my God, will she be able to deliver the work that we are asking? Oh my God, she's a new mother. I don't know if she has an environment where she can log on to video calls. So what you see right now is a home office I've created for myself. And one of the reasons for doing that was to ensure that when I am in the house, I am practically working for my office hours and then it's done. Right? Something similar to what Harjeet said a while back. And I read this post on LinkedIn just day before. As Indians, while India is a country that is known and appreciated for being so accommodating and so courteous, I think it also comes back and bites us because a lot of us in the corporate culture have become people pleasers. We do not have the guts, the capacity, the strength, or even the power to say, no, I can't at this time. Because if I say no, I'm going to be assumed as somebody who's not working from home. Right? So I think that it plays a huge cultural aspect. And while I would not like to compare with other countries at every moment, but in a lot of other countries, virtual working has been a slightly longer and slightly more alive concept than in India. Right? In spite of the fact that it should be the other way around. Look at the irony. People in India have been reporting to people outside of India for donkeys years now. Right? We have supervisors who are based out of California, based out of Switzerland, based out of Canada, Poland, wherever. And that gives us the opportunity to learn about their culture. That gives us the opportunity to work and ensure that there is somebody who believes my work will be done because the person I'm catering to or speaking to is capable enough. When I hired that individual, I of course looked at that competency, right? And in my experience, all supervisors who were not based out of India for me were always trustful. They always knew that this work is going to be done. And in comparison to supervisors I've worked with in India, whether mine or otherwise, I have seen a few who have not been trusting, right? Because of the biases we carry. And I connect this to the fact that the inclusive leadership is so important today. Culture like India, for instance, a while back, if there was a gentleman who was to come to their manager and say, hey, on certain days in a week, I want to go back home early because I need to pick my child from the daycare center. How many eyebrows will that raise? In comparison to a woman saying, this is the time I need to pick my child from the daycare, it's going to get shut, so I need to leave at this time. The eyebrows are not raised because it's assumed that it's her responsibility to do so. And at the same time, oh my God, she leaves early. You see that? So it's like the two sides of the same coin. But if you look at it, a lot of our women folk, and I'm talking that from a perspective of the fact that in India, the women workforce is comparatively much higher in comparison to other geographies, right? You can pick up reports to read that. McKinsey published that data as well, that the women workforce in India is much higher than in other geographies. And in spite of that fact, these are the same women who are multitasking, irrespective of the shared responsibility load not necessarily being there. If you look at other countries, there are people who are sharing responsibilities with pride. It's my washing dishes day, it's my washing laundry day, it's my cooking for my children day, or it's my picking them up from a daycare day, etc. That wasn't very common until the virtual culture started coming to India. And now it's not an uncommon scenario. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about generally as well. I have many men folk who contribute amazingly wonderfully at home. And that's not surprising anymore. In fact, my husband and I both work from home. And there are days that he's cooking and I'm taking a call, and it's absolutely normal. And there are people who stare at us and say, is everything all right? Is something wrong in your house? Correct. So I think that's a big, huge pitfall from an India as well as a culture perspective. Secondly, and I'm going to link this one to COVID. In the recent studies that I have read, there has been a document that was released talking about the fact that working from home Indian professionals have realized that the kind of and the amount of work they end up doing at home is far higher than what they would have done in the office environment. And that is not only because of the amount of work, but also because a lot of us do not understand that you need to start and there is a stop as well. Right? And going back to what Harjeet said a while back, shorts and PJs are very common, right? But the attitude that we carry when we are wearing a formal attire, sitting in a formal place, automatically changes the language you're using, changes the posture you're sitting in, changes the attitude and the mindset you carry. So what you see today in the COVID scenario is a lot of health problems have increased. The cases of abuse have gone higher because people, and I'm not talking about necessarily abuse towards somebody else, but towards your own self. The travel time that I'm saving on, what am I doing in that time? For a person who usually goes to work every day, ask them, they say, oh, I just relax. Well, that's the time you probably need to get up, get moving, exercise. That's the time you probably need to go spend 15 extra minutes with your child, playing Lego or teaching them a concept of study because they don't have school right now. So I think that culturally biased environment is what is getting impacted now. And the bias of, oh my God, work from home is not productive. I can see that changing, that glass is shattered, not because of the culture only, but also because of COVID. Because now, irrespective of designation, irrespective of location, irrespective of how high up you sit in the hierarchy, you are working from home. And there are times you show away from your computer for more than 20 minutes.
Right.
And there are times you're inactive, right? So looking at all of those pieces, I think culturally, India has a longer path to take in comparison to countries like the US and the UK. But we are far ahead in comparison to where we think we are. We are a very productive workforce, a very effective workforce. We have extremely cooperative people at home, right? And you know, the husbands or the partners are not shying away from sharing the load anymore. And women are not shying away from saying, hey, it's my work time, you need to help out. So that's changing, and the sooner we accept it, the better for all of us.
Brilliant, great. I think I would want to come back to you in some time, Natasha. We need to talk about, in one way, you already answered my other question that I had in my mind about the gender roles and what are some managers' responsibility when it comes to gender. But I'll come to that in a bit. I also have a question on the culture, but I would want to go back to Susan for a couple of minutes and check with her. Uh, does culture or does national culture play a role? A live example here, Susan, is in spite of all the technological difficulties, you had to log in at 5:30 in the morning. You being in a different time zone, belonging to a different culture. Would someone from another culture really be ready to wake up in the morning at 5:30 and get onto a call? How do different dispositions and different cultural perspectives take work from home as
Yeah.
how do they take it?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I love what Natasha said too about things being more productive. That has been one of those things that's been out there forever about virtual work, right? Oh, people are more productive, but it's mostly been theory because we've not been letting people work from home. Now we're actually doing reality, right? We're getting we're practicing the theory and reality, and we're finding out, guess what? It's true. People really are more productive from home because they have this ability to be more fluid in what they do. It is culture. Cultural differences are huge when we're working across cultures, and I think, or when we're working remotely, even if we're not working remotely, it's a big deal. But when we don't understand cultural differences, they can be such a source of misunderstanding. So thinking about direct and indirect communication, right? Am I talking to somebody who's more of a direct communicator? Am I talking to somebody who's more of an indirect communicator? You know, here in the States, we tend to be very, very direct. I personally tend to be a little bit more indirect. And so it's, you know, that can be a difficult thing to adjust to. We might not understand each other. Are we more emotionally expressive or more emotionally reserved? Again, I tend to be a little bit more emotionally respective or expressive, you know, pretty atypical US American. And the other thing is time. Vallabh, you had mentioned that about time. One of the things Shivalabh and I always joke about, if he sends me a quick note, he'll say, "Hey, Susan, have you got 5 minutes?" And we both know it's not 5 minutes, right? 45 minutes later, we're laughing because it's right. See, look at him laughing, right? Because it's not going to be 5 minutes. That's just one of those US American Indian differences in terms of time. Time is a little more flowing in India. And there's that idea of task and relationship. In the States, we like our check marks and our agendas. We like to get right down to it. And India is more relationship oriented. So part of the reason our 5 minute conversation lasts 45 is because, I don't know, the first 15, maybe even 30 minutes, right? We'll end up talking about, oh, how's Dan doing? That's my husband. How's Hema doing? You know, and we do all this like relationship stuff. And so understanding that, you know, 5 minutes means 45, and I'm totally fine with that. But those are the things that we have to understand as we're working, that there may be these cultural differences that come into play. And so diversity and inclusion, culture, all of that stuff becomes so much more critical now than I think it ever was before.
Great, great. And I think one of the insights, thanks for giving that personal experience, Susan. It's both ways. You know, everyone needs to walk a few steps, come together. While it's important for an American to understand that when an Indian says 5 minutes, it could be 45 minutes. And it's also important for someone who's an Indian to understand that when an American says 5 minutes, he or she means 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
it goes both ways. So going over to Harjeet, you know, I would like to pick up from where Natasha left. Now we're going to the other side. One is virtual teams. Now we'll talk about organizations and managers and their responsibilities. And while we do this, I want to talk to the listeners, people who have logged in. If you have any questions, if you have anything to ask, etc., please feel free to use the chat window to ask your questions. We'll take up your questions in about 15 minutes from now, 15, 20 minutes from now, we'll be taking your questions. So if you do have questions, please do type in, start typing them in the chat window, and we'll take them up in some time. So Harjeet, the question to you is, I'd like to mention the point of productivity that Natasha talked about. Is that yes, we are more productive because, you know, far more productive than we were while we were in the office. Now, is there a chance, and again, culturally speaking, from an India perspective, is there a chance that in the new world, with people having more time in hand because they're not traveling to office, etc., is there a chance that managers might take that bit of reality to the advantage of abusing or of making people work beyond what they should ideally? Because what I've heard in the recent weeks or recent days is that today people are working much more than they used to work in office, to the point of being stressed out. So how much is too much? Probably that can probably summarize my question. Harjeet,
So let me start with how much is too much. You would have seen when you go to hotels, there is a doorman who opens door for you. And this used to happen a lot. After that, automatic doors come. But you go to Taj, you still see a doorman. Because they forgot to remove it. Because they thought this is something which is important. This gives us grace. When the things change, as humans, we forget to change our way of working. Look, traditionally, all the industries, in fact, if we talk about India, uh, uh, see 1980s or 1990s, hardly 10% was services sector. What was predominant was manufacturing sector. So our thought process has been shaped by manufacturing process or the manufacturing sector. In manufacturing sector, if you are not coming to office in time, it is not about you are coming or not coming. If you are not coming to office in time, that is a stigma. So when you move to services sector or when you talk about work from home, that is seen as, oh, this is a crime. Like you will see certain companies, they will say work from home, we don't have such policy and we don't want to introduce also. It was IT sector which actually broke through and started working with US. Everything was new for them. So they could redefine the paradigm. And when they redefined the paradigm, people were looking at what are these practices? Where these practices of people-oriented practices came up. It was not people-specific practices or people-friendly practices. These were business-friendly practices which people also found friendly. Now, thing is, manufacturing mindset still continues even in service sectors. And work from home, or the way Natasha was saying, all these things that means how can you do that? So this is culture, and this is not only from business side. Look, another problem which is which we in India faces, that is problem of we have lot of people. Now what happens is when you have lot of people, then you know that you are replaceable. If you throw tantrums, there will be another 10 people who will be eyeing for your job. They want to do what you are doing right now. So people work out of insecurity. Even if today businesses allow that you work from home and one day you have to come to office, you will see that most of the people will be heading to offices because one is how their bosses are seeing it, and how they are seeing it that if I am not in front of the eyes, out of sight, out of mind, will I have my job or not? That will play more than anything till the time you are confident of your skill set, that this is my core competency and I am operating on my core competency. When we work in physical environment, it is like a job, and it is administrative job. Like here, when jobs are designed, you see the difference between how jobs are designed in advanced countries and how jobs are defined in say developing countries. So it is like there is a rough cut job description, but in India you do 10 more things outside your job description. Wherever work is craftily designed, in those cases work from home works very well. You have clear outcome what you are supposed to do. This COVID-19 situation has done very good in terms of how contact center industry is now going to operate from India. Contact center industry actually had to shut down and they had to allow people to work from home. And if people are working from home, how it will happen? I believe in past 6 weeks there were advances. Few softwares came up and now people are able to take calls from home. Now thing is, now if people are able to take calls from home and are able to cater to customers, as a businessman, would you like to bring them to office and increase your expense by twice? So if I am able to do, like generally what you do in this like contact center kind of industry, if 40% is your manpower cost, you do loading of 40% for infrastructure, transport, this, that. Now suddenly your margins are going to be huge, or maybe you will be able to offer the services at lower price. So that is a big shift which is going to happen. And wherever money is going to guide it, you will see the impact on how the work will happen will change drastically. So
Great. Super.
that's how the cookie crumbles.
Thanks. That's a great perspective. And I would like to go to Susan. Before I go there, I would like to open up the next poll. You have 30 seconds to respond to these two more questions. Since we're talking about leading, since we're talking about business and managers and their behaviors and expectations, I want to open up this poll. Two questions, 30 seconds. Please respond, and then I'll share the results. There you go. Time starts now. People are still responding, so I'll keep it open for another 20 seconds so that we have enough window for people to respond. Okay, I'll end the poll here. Let's see the results. Okay, these are the results look. Almost 80% of the people attending today's session have managed a virtual team. And the highest reason why team leading to virtual teams could be challenging is team member attitude according to the results. And this is why I wanted to take this question. The next question to you, Susan, is the lowest score is for manager communication skills. 14% of people have said, and this you're talking from a perspective of a manager. Now, do you think the results would be different if the same poll was thrown open to your team members? Then what would your team members say about manager communication skills? So a while ago, Susan, we were talking about trust and communication. So from a manager responsibility perspective, from making virtual teams successful perspective, so what's your take on trust and communication being an integral part of successful virtual teams?
Yeah, communication is more important than ever with virtual teams. And here's why. When we're virtual, I think there's a tendency to think, oh, I'll just send an email or I'll just send a message, and we don't take time to talk. The problem with written communication is that it is read in the tone of the person reading it. So something that is written from a very positive perspective, if I'm really angry, upset, or frustrated when I read that, I'm reading it angry, upset, and frustrated. And so that's where all the miscommunication comes in. So I want you to think about this for a moment, okay? A simple sentence. I didn't say I don't like her. I didn't say I don't like her. I didn't say I don't like her, right? And you can continue and put emphasis on a different emphasis on every word in that sentence. And it's the same words, but it's a different sentence and a different meaning every single time. And so verbal communication becomes so important as we are working with virtual teams in building the trust, because what might be a simple statement can be taken completely out of context if it's written. And so, there are times we do have to write. And so the best course here is to really grant each other some latitude understand that we, especially now, are in times that are, frustrating and scary for many people. And so we're not necessarily always operating from our heart. We're operating from our head. And if things start to rise, leave a voice message. We have opportunity. That's actually, Shabalab and I, usually it's Facebook Messenger with a voice message going back and forth, so people can hear your tone, so they know what's coming through. The other important thing is to find many channels of communication at this time, besides, talk, right? Find many, because we know that some people don't like being on camera. I know, here it's a, little different. We do have video off for everybody on camera, but there may not be folks who like being on camera. Others may not want to talk in front of a group, especially in, a hierarchical society like India, right? They may not want to be speaking up if their manager's on there with them. So how are you going to be getting through what channels of communication are you going to be getting information? Other folks may just lack complete finesse in written communication. So make sure you've got a lot of channels for communication, and especially make sure that you're taking the opportunity to talk to people as much as possible, so that your tone comes through and they're not reading in their tone and mood that they're in at that moment.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Susan. And which is why it even more becomes critical. I like what you said. Most of the written material is read from the perspective of the person who is receiving a material, which is why it becomes, and especially in a multicultural, as well as in a monocultural environment, it becomes important to have those verbal communication.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to Natasha. Natasha, earlier you were talking about gender roles, men and women, etc. The question to you is, does gender play a role while managing virtual teams? From a managerial perspective, from a supervisor, for a supervisor, does gender play a role? Is there something that a leader or a manager is expected or should do different when he or she is handling people from different genders? Or should the approach be universal in nature? And what are the positives and pitfalls?
Sure, thank you. I think this is a wonderful question, Shri. So I'm not going to answer this as an answer. I'm going to share a story here, right? Bear with me for a couple of minutes. So I love to talk about this story. It's called the sausage story. Imagine a little girl who went to the father and said, "Hey, Daddy, I've noticed that every time we cook sausages, we always chop the ends. Why do we do that?" Daddy says, "I don't know, honey. Go ask your mom." So the little girl, pigtails waving, goes to the mom. Mom says, "Well, I don't know, honey. Your grandma taught me that way." The little girl goes to the grandma and says, "Why do we chop the ends when we fry the sausages before we have a breakfast?" And the grandma laughed. All right, she said, "Why are you asking that question?" She said, "Because every time I get my sausage with the ends cut off, and I wanted to know why." And the grandmother says, "Well, I'll tell you what. When we started eating sausages, we weren't very well to do. We only had one saucepan in the house, and that was of a certain size. So instead of cutting the meatier center, I always cut out the edges that were not as meaty. And I didn't know that your parents are still serving you the same way." So this brings me back to the fact that there was no method to the madness. At that point in time, she said, "Instead of cutting off the meaty center, I'll cut off the edges and I'll give more meat to be consumed." And that was followed from generation to generation. And it took a little curious child to say why. Therefore, in my personal opinion, there is no role that is only a man's role, only a woman's role, or only any other gender's role for that matter, right? There are many sensitive men I've come across. There are many aggressive women I've come across. So, and I also connect this back to, I think you mentioned that point when we're talking about job descriptions in India, right? If we look at the JDs that are typically designed, and I'm talking about across sectors, I'm talking about hospitality, retail, IT, customer services, all these sectors. The job descriptions typically have these few words that flow around with them, like aggressive, sensitive, cooperative. And the moment I say these words, there's automatically a bulb right here that says female, male, female, male. And that happens because of the conditioning we've had. That happens because we carry something called as an unconscious bias. And, just to break that barrier, it is absolutely human to have an unconscious bias. You can't come across a single human who says, I'm not biased. It will be pure lies. The beauty of unconscious bias is to know that you are biased and to also be aware how do you manage and mitigate that bias. So for example, and I'm going to take a very India specific example here. For example, if I know as a manager that I am biased against women who are coming back from a maternity leave, or I am biased against men who want to work from home, or I'm biased against somebody who's disabled, etc., etc. And there could be many such examples, right? If I know that sometimes I notice myself doing something which isn't appropriate, and I know that I'm probably going to talk to somebody who's a recent mother, I'd say, hey, remember that. Flag up in your head. If you are able to tell yourself that this is your bias, and you need to know how to mitigate that, you need to know how to ensure that that bias does not impact the decisions you are making, and specifically decisions that lead to people relationship and business results. If you're able to do that, then it's fantastically done, right? The why is fairly important for us. The understanding of the fact that I am biased, what are my biases and what am I doing about it is very important for us. And I think because we're talking about how does a manager play a role in all of this, very basic understanding of how this industry functions, right? And I'm talking now about the IT, software, BPO, KPO sort of an industry. I remember back in the day when we started off in the BPOs, I used to work a shift that started at 9:30 in the night. And I come from a conservative family, all right? So my grandfather asked me, are you sure you have to work nights? What's the desperation? Look at a better job that offers you day hours. So it was an automatic assumption that because the hours are night hours, which are ideally the most productive for that business, required by that business, and therefore I'm working those hours, are not great because it is assumed that you shouldn't be working in the nights. From that point to where we are today. But the wonderful thing about that time of that time in the career, for me particularly, was the kind of skills that were taught to you. You still get those technical books that are called C++ for dummies, right? XYZ for dummies. I think we have started to think too smart of ourselves. We need to go back to being a dummy. And when we do that, we realize that we are expecting our people to be so much more available for us when they're working virtually. How many times do we FaceTime with them? How many times are we even able to connect a name to a face? Is the manager leading by example? And it's absolutely okay. For example, in my team, I have many women and I have only 4 men. So what we do sometimes is we switch it on when we're having breakfast in the morning. Saying, hey, what did you make for breakfast? Hey, this is what I made for breakfast. Oh, what's the recipe? It is a strict rule to not talk about work. It's only a 15-minute call. It's an optional call. If you want to join in, you're most welcome. It's not mandatory. And we realized when we started off, out of 32 people, there were only 3 or 5 who would show up. And now they say, can we extend it by 5 minutes? Can we stay for another 5 minutes? It's wonderful to connect with people. Right? So in those times when we were treated as dummies, we were taught basic etiquette. Today, when people are working virtually, sometimes not on the video call, we don't follow simple conference call etiquette, simple video call etiquette. One person is talking over the other. You're not even paying attention to the person who's not visible to you. So if the person's not on video, you forget the person's even there. When you're taking a vote, when you're talking about an important decision, you don't even take that person's name. And then suddenly that individual is like, hey, should I even say I exist, or should I just sit quietly and wait for the decision and agree with what comes out? Right? So I think these basics are what we need to revise. Not that we aren't aware of them, we definitely are, but we need to revise them. We also need to look at the fact that our hours are the same hours that needed to be earlier. The time that you are given as an extra time does not need to be abused by yourself or by your supervisor or anybody else. That's your own time. And it's absolutely okay to be able to do more than one thing at a time if you're able to divide your time intentionally. So when I'm writing emails, I have my child sitting next to me working on her homework. And it's okay. If I am able to focus on this, she's able to focus on that. Nobody's disturbing anybody. But if your focus is divided, that's when it's not a great idea, right? But I think it's fantastic to understand this and also realize that for many people, working from home or virtual environment is not the greatest benefit because it depends largely on the personality type of the individual as well. And I'm saying this out of an experience here because there are a lot of people who are extroverts. And when I say extroverts, I mean they gain energy by being with other people. And there are people who are introverts. So if you have an extrovert sit at home for 5 days, the person's going to come to you and say, hey, I'm not feeling well. I don't feel like working. I'm feeling very low. What that means is they're not getting energy from the people they were used to meet earlier. And we need to acknowledge that. If there is an extrovert in your team, as a manager, you need to be aware that, hey, this person needs to be able to interact. So you get on a video call with that individual. If there is somebody who does not want to, is an introvert, it's all right. If you know that they're able to understand your emails, you can get your connect with each other, it's fine. Get on a phone call at the most with that individual because they are working fine. They like it that way. They understand you. There's no misunderstandings happening anywhere. But if you identify the need of an extrovert, you must make that effort of making that extra call that has a video interface. That's the only way they get engaged. And that's my 2 bits on it.
Sure. Thank you so much. Now, before we move to the last section, we are at time. It's a good time for us to open up the question and answer section. But before that, one last thing to Harjeet. With your experience, you worked in different sectors, different industries, Harjeet. Can you think of one example somewhere? You don't have to name the company that that is in reference. But is there one example where you have seen an organization leveraging the best benefits for themselves and for the employees, where virtual work environment or work arrangement was enforced? A quick bite from you, then we'll move to question.
Before this, I was working with a US-based organization where the entire work was virtual only. So virtual work has its benefits, and instead I will answer a question which is coming on my screen, which is saying that you're talking about virtual work, but it is not resonating because can everyone go into virtual work? So frankly speaking, look, this is not a blanket approach. Why we call it a blanket approach? When there is a lot of cold and you go outside and start distributing blankets to people who are sitting or who are lying down on the streets, that is blanket approach. That whosoever is on the street, give that person a blanket, and what they do is they start selling those blankets rather than using them, because everyone wants to give blankets to those who are lying down on the street. So blanket approach doesn't work. Look, if you are in a service industry where you can offer your services digitally, in those cases, virtual work environment can work very well. If you are in a manufacturing setup, then you will see that there are a lot of functions which are generally your corporate office or your IT setup. That entire corporate office which is supporting the manufacturing setup, that can work virtually. And this is all mindset. So when this entire lockout thing was happening, I raised a question that, and this was to the principal of the college where my son studies. I asked the principal, like, this lockdown is going to come, and can't you teach students virtually? You know what her response was? This was like 10th of March. That time, official lockdown was not involved, not informed, and people were like worried about COVID. Her response was, they don't study in the class and you are asking us to teach them in a virtual environment. And 1 month down the line, what has happened is they have started teaching them virtually. Now, thing is, they learn also, but the method of teaching has changed. Earlier, a professor used to stand, and the big effort was bringing everyone together and making everyone concentrate on what the professor is saying. Now it is about, this is the content. If you have any clarifications, come on the call, clear those clarifications, and then you have to take the quiz. The method of learning has changed. So what will happen is that the method is going to change. It is not going to be the same work environment. It is not the digitization of processes which is going to happen. This is a transformation which is happening, and it is because of this big event which has happened. Whenever these kind of things happen, like First World War happened, technology improved, medical improved, and parity improved. More women came into workforce. Same happened with World War II, and same is happening with COVID. That parity is going to improve when you virtually talk to your team members. I have seen a lot of biases in hiring and working with team members actually go away. You focus more on competence or skill than you focus on which gender, caste, creed, region, religion. All those things don't matter that much.
Sure, great. Thanks so much. These were lovely insights. Now I'd like to get there are a few questions that are there on the board, and maybe there's a question from Deepika Jain, and she's not mentioned who it was it for. Maybe Susan, you can take this question, and then if Harjeet or Natasha have an opinion that they can provide. I think it sounds more statistical, but it says, how would the span of control be while managing people virtually? So probably what she's trying to ask is, what is the best size of a team that can be managed in a virtual environment? So Susan, would you want to take this up? Any insights there?
I think earlier, Shivalab, you had said, yeah, you had said you'd done some research on that, right? So my bias, right? Because I did work, right, as we were outsourcing to India, and I managed a team of, the States here had 30 and virtually another 30 in India. So that's, that's my bias. I think this can be done effectively, but it does take practice and skill. It is making sure that there's communication. It is being aware of cultural differences. It is being aware of our biases. But I think the information you found, Shivala, what did it say? Over 15 gets ineffective?
Yeah, see, Howard, and what it said was the best size of a team to work efficiently is anything that is 10 or less. And Point Consultancy, they have done the research where they say that the worst performing teams had team members which are 13 or more. So 10 is an optimum, is a good number, is what it says in terms of span of control.
Yeah, and we do have to remember, and that makes sense logically, right? We do have to remember this does require, as I said earlier, it does require more people skills. You do have to be checking in with your people in order to build that trust. And I'm not saying in a, what are you doing, when are you going to deliver it kind of way, right? That doesn't build trust. That's demanding. You need to be there in a more supportive role. How can I help you today? What can I do to support you? How are things going on? And, to Natasha's point, build these points of even just, 15 minutes, have a regular schedule for them to have a point that is normal in this abnormal stuff going on. And so I do think, a smaller team, it's going to take longer when you're doing more personal connections. And so a smaller team is going to be important with that. So I would say, 10 is probably about right.
Sure, great. The next question is from Gaurav. Yes.
I have a different response to this question. Sure. Look, one is, if your work is not defined and you are doing some intellectual kind of work, then 1:10 works well. But if you see the current paradigm, when you had Uber drivers. Customer puts a trip and Uber driver takes it. So what happens is there is no manager in between. It is like playing PUBG where there is no manager, you have work. So what comes to my mind is that in future, that is how things will move. Like Swiggy guy gets the intimation on his or her phone that this is what you have to deliver from this place to this place. It is not a manager managing. Look, as the technology is developing, the jobs which are routine in nature, which are technologically possible, in those cases, this span of control which will actually not make sense. Technology or these servers will be managing much more jobs. As far as intellectual jobs are concerned, I completely agree with Susan and you that it is 1:10 or 1:12, which works very well.
Absolutely. So which any job that is rule driven or rule based or process based, and there's no managerial intervention, probably that kind of a mathematics or a classification does not work. So thanks Harjeet and thanks Susan for your insights there. There's another question for Harjeet from Gaurav. It says, and I think you have partly answered that, Harjeet, while you were talking a while ago, but I would still like to throw this question. It says, what kind of transition would the Indian corporate workplace see post-COVID? Any additional thoughts on that?
Look, I am not a future teller, so I avoid doing that. But based on whatever signals you are getting from the current environment, there are a lot of things which will not be done in the same manner. And it will be because of acceptance of people that this can be done in this particular manner. Like virtual onboarding will be a possibility. I've seen that in US. It is not that person has to come to your office and attend an induction. Then you send an induction presentation PowerPoint to that person that go through, this is our induction material or it is available on a website, go through that and you're done with this. Like 4 videos you have seen, this is what our company is, this is what your work is, this is what our culture is. Those kind of things you will start experiencing here. And the point which Natasha made, look, we had a technological backbone which came into existence in past 3-4 years, that now entire India is connected. But have we leveraged it? Can sitting in Mumbai, do I hire people from villages and ask them to work from home? I don't do that. You might see those kind of things start happening because people have started thinking in that manner. The thing is, it is not going to happen suddenly that from tomorrow it is going to happen. There are technological advances which are happening. We are sitting on a Zoom call. Before this, how many of us did Zoom calls? Most of us used to believe that bring everyone in a hall and then let's do a function and felicitate each other. Here, when you are doing this, Susan is there with us, although she had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But you're seeing the richness of the discussion. Just by she coming on the platform, it brought a different perspective also. So, you talk about any aspect, the way you hire, the way you onboard, the way you train. Eklavya model of training will work better. This is the material. People will start appreciating Coursera much more than going to colleges. And the learning academy people which are there in organizations, they are going to face a very tough time because now it is about content. It is not about delivery.
Right.
So
I agree. And if I could make a point in addition to that, Harjeet, I agree wholeheartedly what you said, right? It's absolutely the truth. And in terms of, for example, induction and online introduction to an organization, I know of companies that are already doing that, right? So there was a point in time, even our company had a 2.5-day induction, 2.5 days of induction. And now we send them materials before they join in. They can access the website, they can go through the kind of businesses we have. Some mandatory courses that would have impacted the production time are now being done before they join in. They have their employee code. After their joining formalities are done, before they're productively sitting in the office, their mandatory options are over and finished with. So you're saving business time, you're giving them the trust that they're able to, they are able to do something, they belong to an organization, and at the same time you're earning more money because they become billable much sooner. So that model is already effective in many places, but like you said, the acceptance of the fact that it's effective has now come in.
Yeah, and I think, Natasha, if I could add on to that, what we were talking about earlier, where the theory and the practice, right?
Yes.
Now companies are recognizing that, yeah, there is big cost savings. People are more engaged. And one of the studies I looked at here in the States, they're saying about by the end of next year, because of what's happening now and because companies are being more accepting of it, they're predicting about 25 to 30% of the workforce working from home on multiple days. And that's, up, 2-3 times what it is now, because we're starting to get that theory into practice. And yes, there are cost savings. There are all kinds of advantages to this. And to Harjeet's point, we do have to discern what jobs can do this and what can't. And treating everybody fairly doesn't mean treating everybody the same.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Great. Thanks so much, everyone. And next question for Harjeet. Again, I think you have answered this in some way in the previous question, but it says that I appreciate the views being presented. However, they are from a perspective where procedures have been standardized over time. How about startups where the environment is dynamic? So this is a question to Harjeet. I think it's in a way it's related to the SOP being set and rule-based work versus non-rule-based. So your take, Harjeet.
Okay, startups generally start from garages. And when you're starting from garage, for a startup, infra is a big cost. Um, so my wife wanted to start a business. So I told her, why don't you take an office? And she said, you are an employee, you don't understand business. I said, how come? She said, if I take office, it is going to add to my cost. I'm not making any money right now. And that time I realized you actually don't need an office. You need a place where people can sit together, brainstorm, and do things like that. Problem was there a technology? Were there tools? Or maybe they were there, they were not popular. I have seen, although WhatsApp is not the right example, but WhatsApp works. And a lot of people actually discuss, do video calls. Even I've seen people doing group calls on these kind of platforms, so as to create value. So if you can sit at your home and collaborate and get things done, or even if you have to do field work, at any time you need some support, you can actually get to that support. You can't avoid client meetings, but for that you don't have to come to office. So look, all my life I have worked in startups, and when I put myself in any one of those organizations, I find that this particular arrangement works. It works very well, irrespective whether you are a startup or established. SOP is just a method to manage a scale, nothing more than that. Even if you don't have a SOP, you are a startup, you can very well work in this kind of environment.
Sure, sure. So there are a lot of questions coming in. So the participation has been excellent. So because of the question, there are about 2-3 more questions, people. So we might extend by about 7 or 8 minutes. I hope it's fine. The next question is for Natasha. It's from Kumar. It says, "How this is from a team member perspective, not a manager perspective. How do you handle a situation when you're expected to work on certain tasks given by your boss, even during odd working hours, as you're at home only, and might be busy for some time, but you're still expected to revert even if it is late?" So
Wonderful question. Um, that's where the trust comes in, right? You need to ensure that there are X number of working hours you are dedicating to your official work. And if there are 5 tasks you're already doing, I'm just saying it for the sake of numbers. If there are 5 tasks you're already working on, and the sixth one has come on to you, have a very clear conversation that these are 5 pieces I'm working on, and the sixth one seems urgent. May I put this one on top of the list and remove one and move it to tomorrow? Because I can practically do 5 in terms of the time investment I'm making, right? So if I can do only 5, automatically either I'll have to stretch to cover up for the sixth task, or I can move it to tomorrow. Let your manager decide that which one can be moved. Or if you understand that work by yourself, you say, hey, I believe that we can move this one to tomorrow because it's not as urgent as the last one you gave me. So let me work on this one first, and I'll move this one to tomorrow, give it to you by 2 p.m. or 12 a.m. or 12 p.m., whatever works for you. Most probably you'll get a response saying, yes, of course. The reason why we end up doing these things is because we never say we can't.
sure. Great. Thanks, Natasha. This question is from Girish to Harjeet. A very simple question. Do you see the art of saying no getting refined for virtual working conditions when one does not leave from the office or leave for home for Indian conditions? Like what you said earlier, Harjeet. So the
Look, what
question,
happens is there are certain advantages of working from home. You would have seen that the shouting which used to happen, that has come down. And a lot of people have confirmed that to me, that it has come down because the boss is also sensitive that the family also might be listening. So this is a social pressure which gets created. And what Natasha was explaining a while ago, that these are the problems of physical world also, that you don't know how to have that conversation with your manager, how to prioritize, when to say no. Now, thing is, these problems are going to stay till the time we mature into this kind of culture and we start understanding. Look, for the first time to say no, you have to be under a lot of pressure so that you burst. It is not recommended that you burst, but what I have seen, once you burst, then you learn, and your boss also learns. So either you leave the job or you start working well with that manager. And if both of you can reconcile that, okay, this is how to do assertive communication. In fact, uh, there is a course on assertiveness which is readily available on Google. If you go through that course, you will understand there are specific techniques like a broken record technique. If you start searching that, you will find that there are 10 other techniques how to deal with your bosses for getting things done which you want to get done. And whosoever has gone through that course, they did not report these kind of problems.
I'd just like to add on to that one, Harjeet. Very common example here. We go back and connect this to official work and housework and otherwise as well, right? This has been even said by Narayan Murthy in one of his blogs. He said that when I used to work and go to office every day, I noticed that there was this one intern who would stay back after everyone had gone. Until the time it would be 9:30, the intern would be in the office, right? I started to realize that probably he works a lot more. And one of the days during the day, I needed something that he claimed his expertise was, and I started looking for him. I couldn't find him very well in the organization. So then in the night, I asked him again, oh my God, I was looking for you in the day and I couldn't find you. He said, oh yeah, I'd gone out. I was taking a break. So a lot of us believe that if I'm staying late in the office or if I'm logged into wee hours of the night, I am being noticed. Actually, no, it's going against you. If you're telling them you're available till 12 in the night, you will get emails that will demand you to finish work at 12 in the night. And if you're able to effectively work in the hours you're supposed to work in, they're not worried because they know you will respond in the hours you're supposed to work in.
sure. That's great. Thank you, Natasha. Last 2 questions we have. One is for Susan. What are the ways to increase the trust between team members when you're working on the virtual environment. Now, Vikram, one thing is for sure that Susan and I are going to tell you is that this question, as a response, demands a full-length training program, which we'll offer you after this session is over. But I would like to have Susan handle this question and summarize
Yeah. Little advertisement. Yeah, well, soft skills like empathy and compassion and emotional intelligence are more important now than they ever have been. I've been talking about compassion and diversity for years now, and all of a sudden, every time I scroll through LinkedIn, somebody's posting something about, oh, we have to work with compassion. I'm like, yes, we have to work with compassion. So the thing is, in times like these, it's our brain's job to keep us safe. We go into survival mode, and our brain is scanning for ways to keep us safe and secure. It's especially important now to use that emotional intelligence to recognize for ourselves, and Natasha had mentioned the importance of self-awareness earlier, recognize for ourselves, how am I feeling right now? And if I'm feeling frustrated or angry, it means something is not working according to my beliefs or expectations, right? So I've got to have that self-awareness first. But second of all, this idea about empathy and compassion, communication, it's important to reach out and just say, how can I support you? Is there anything that I can do for you today? Because when we shift the focus from ourselves and our concerns onto compassion and caring for somebody else, that we start to recognize that we're all human, right? We're all connected. And the great thing, when we act in compassionate ways, it begets more compassion, right? So if I'm kind to you, then it helps you want to be kind to somebody else. And so that is such an important piece of trust. These connections, empathy, being aware of our emotions and how we are coming off and what our emotions are telling us about us as well. And so those are really important skills in terms of building trust and connection, whether these times or not, because I see another question here about how's this all change. Doesn't matter, really. It doesn't matter. Like I said, I've been talking about this before we came to this point. So it is important that trust and the connection is important, emotional intelligence, empathy, all of that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Susan. So I think it's been a brilliant session so far. Great insights, wonderful insights, and great questions from the participants too. Before we close the day, Hema, would you like to take the stage? Would you want to say something before we close?
First of all, a big thank you to all of you. As an audience, I think it was fantastic, engagement. And thank you, Susan. I know we woke you up very early, but you can go back to sleep now. Thank you, Mr. Khanduja. Thanks for coming on board. Thanks, Natasha. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Hema. Thanks a lot. Because of you, I'm here. Because if you would not have sent that invitation, then I believe we would not have met, and I would not have known you and Shiri.
Right.
I'm so happy we met, and I'm so happy that you are here. Thank you so much for accepting that invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Siddharth, your question I think has been answered by Harjeet in the chat window. I would like to just take the last couple of minutes to invite everyone. Two things. After this session is over, you'll get a quick email from us. Those who have left early can give feedback there. But there's a barcode there. You can see a QR code there. So if you're having your phone by your side, if you can scan that QR code, it'll take you to a feedback link, and it'll really help us to get some response from you in terms of how you like the session and what you loved about it and what sort of suggestions for improvement you have. Because this is going to be an ongoing session. We have planned more than 45, 50 sessions through the year. Every week we'll be having one or the other panel discussion like this. So your thoughts do matter to us. So please do use a QR code to provide your responses. It will take you to a feedback survey, and it will take about 2 minutes. That's all. And while we are at it, Susan, thank you so much for joining us as early as 5:30 in the morning. There, really appreciate you slept only for 3 to 4 hours, but then you and I definitely share that in, relationship where I can say, "Hey, come on, Susan, it's only 3 in the morning. You can join in." So thank you so much, and Harjeet,
Thank
really
you, Val.
appreciate the fact that you accepted our invite and at a short notice were able to come and get ready and for the session and provide your insights. Natasha, once again, this is not the first time we are meeting in a forum. We've met before, but it's always a delight to have you speak, to hear your insights. And I'm sure there's going to be a continuous journey with all of us, maybe meeting again and again in various forums.
Thank you.
And you wonderful participants, thank you so much. I love the questions. In the last few sessions that we conducted, this has been the best in terms of the kind of questions and interactions we've had from participants. So thank you, everybody. I will leave this slide on so that you can copy, you can use the QR code to provide your feedback. So those who are done can leave. Really appreciate. Thank you so much. Once more to all the panelists, our heartfelt gratitude for your contribution. Have a wonderful day, Susan. Have a good sleep and have a beautiful evening, Harjeet and Natasha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.